Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lore Lords episode 31. Today we have a wonderful topic for you that Atlas tonight is bringing to the table. So, Atlas, what do you got for us on this fine May evening?
Yeah, it is a nice day, actually.
Yeah.
We were just talking about how it's not too hot out. It's got a nice even 80 here in sunny Los Angeles, California. So I love comic books. We talked about this before.
Do ya?
Yeah. We did this whole 2-hour long episode on Batman. I don't know if you remember that one.
I do.
So that was great. But the truth of the matter is, I am, as much as I love Batman and I love DC comics, I don't like them as much as the other one.
What is the other one called, Atlas? Just to give us manga. You're talking about Japanese manga.
No, not Shonen Jump. Okay. That's the other one. We're talking about Marvel comics.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay,
exactly that one. Yep, that's the one. So I figured I was trying to look for a way to talk about Marvel comics that could get people more a lot of people are more familiar with Marvel nowadays than DC outside of Batman,
right?
Because of this thing called the MCU, also known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah, pretty big deal.
About it, sure.
People hate them. They hate on them. They love them.
I don't see a lot of hate, but maybe that's because the algorithms on my social media are...
Let me put it this way. The people who hate on them are people who want, to think movies should only be for Oscar-winning art pieces and not fun times.
Oh, that's stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't get me wrong. I love a good, fancy art house movie. Those are great. We love them. But... sometimes I want to just watch people beat the shit out of each other for
absolutely.
2.5 hours.
And the truth of the matter is, movie theaters now owe their existence post-pandemic to Marvel movies because they sell tickets.
I was gonna say, even movie theaters in general kind of owe a lot of their success to big blockbuster films like Star Wars. Because we could talk about that, which we could actually that'd be a good one. Talk about how in 1977. That film alone basically blew movie theaters up to a place they were never at before.
Yeah, and the certain movie in 2012 that we'll be talking about today did that again. And
yes.
But I didn't want to just go over the MCU. We've probably all seen it, right? That's something we know, which I'm going to go over the movies. But this is part one. The title of this episode is Marvelous Movies Part 1. And there's going to be a lot of parts. I don't know how many parts, but there's going to be a lot. I'm not going to be doing them in a row. They're going to be spaced out. There'll be a part 2 sometime down the line,
Right.
Maybe part 2 will be the next episode. I don't know, but it's not going to be all of them in a row for sure. So what we're doing in part 1 is I'm going to be going over what's known as Phase 1 of the MCU, which is 6 movies. Mm-hmm. But as I go over them, I'm going to be going over what the deal with these characters in the comic books is.
Oh, okay.
So it's not going to go super deep into the comic side of things, because each one of these characters could have their whole Lore Lords episodes, right? So
for sure.
Yeah, we're just going to be a little bit on each of these movies. You're going to talk about in the comics, where these guys come from, what the deal is, that kind of thing. And so I figured let's just jump into it. We now know the setup. Each of these movies is divided into 3 major sections. I have the first section is called the comics, the second section is called the movie, and the third section is called my reaction and looking back, and your reaction too and looking back.
Wonderful. I like it.
These,
I actually, the only movie that I haven't seen in the MCU so far, well, I actually started it the other day, but I couldn't finish it because I was bored out of my skull, was The Eternals. I couldn't finish it. It was boring. But
I like
everything
The
else
Eternals.
I've seen. I wanted to like it.
It's definitely it's a different vibe. I kind of wish I didn't make it, because throwing the Eternals in, as a comic book reader, throwing the Eternals into the Marvel world is an unnecessary complication. And now I've brought that complication into things. I don't know what they're planning to do with that, but we'll see.
Sure.
We'll get to the Eternals eventually on here, and you'll probably have watched it by then, because it's going to be quite a while. So yeah, you've seen all the movies, which is great. That's going to help a lot with this. And the first movie in the MCU ever was Iron Man in 2008.
Yeah, I remember that. I was in high school still. Fuck me.
Yeah, same. And I saw it in theaters. And I loved it. Had a great time. But this movie is directed by Jon Favreau.
Yeah.
Who nowadays is even bigger than he was back then. I mean, he's a big director.
God, yeah.
He's also
huge now.
He's huge now. He's this launched him. He already was a good director. He was like a known.
Right.
He was a director. This launched him in a way that did change movies forever.
Well deserved. Such a talented, and also kind guy. Just like a sweet man.
100%. He's such a nice person from everything I've seen. Like he'll always take a selfie with you, which is great.
Yeah.
So the first movie of the MCU was Iron Man, and this is based on at the time, I wrote semi-popular comic book hero of the same name. And I say this because before this movie exploded and started the MCU, Iron Man was only known as being an Avenger. He only had a very short-lived 90s animated series, and he was barely known worldwide, like compared to other characters. Figure. Yeah, so did I. Yeah. And I had a couple Avengers comics too, so I knew who Iron Man was. I watched the show as a kid, but even then, never was a big fan of Iron Man because he was so minor compared to people like Captain America, and of course, at the time, the X-Men.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
Yeah, so like he was such a B-lister for Marvel at the time. Like Iron Man was not that big of a deal. So we're going to start off going over the comic side of things, which we're going to talk about his original appearance of Iron Man was in a comic called Tales of Suspense, issue number 39, which was in March of 1963. And this character story was created by none other than the dynamic duo of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
Oh, yeah.
Iron Man is described as a man named Tony Stark, who is a quintessential capitalist who runs Stark Industries, a large weapon manufacturing business for the U.S. Army. And Stan Lee made the character with the intention of the audience hating him. He's on record having said that. He was meant to be hated. He was written in 1963 during Vietnam. And as a warmonger, he made he made weapons for war. So, people didn't like that. It was a very anti-war time. He has even a quote saying, "I thought it would be fun to take the kind of character that nobody would like, none of our readers would like, and shove him down their throats and make them like him. And then it turned out working, and he became very popular."
Yeah, I mean, from the movie adaptations, I love Tony Stark. I fell in love with him. Robert Downey Jr.'s adaptation of him is fucking incredible.
Yeah, and
it really is.
He's pretty similar to the comic version, even back then in the 60s. He hasn't changed much in his personality. Tales of Suspense comics would see Iron Man fighting against communist agents from Vietnam and Russia, including the still popular villain today, Anton Vanko, who is known as Crimson Dynamo. And he's commonly seen even now as Iron Man's nemesis next to the Mandarin, who debuted in Tales of Suspense number 46 in July 1963. Crimson Dynamo, however, would not be seen in the MCU, still, to this day. Except for a very, very brief appearance in one episode of Agent Carter show, where he is seen going against Tony's father, Howard Stark, instead of Tony himself. And then again, he would be seen in Iron Man 2 for a second. Tales of Suspense issue number 45 would also see the introduction of Tony Stark's secretary, Virginia Pepper Potts, who would grow to become his main love interest as the series would grow. In September 1963, Iron Man would see his first team-up and rise to comic popularity in Avengers issue number 1, where Iron Man would gather Hulk, Thor, and Ant-Man and Wasp to take on Thor's evil brother Loki. So that was when he kind of got popular, and that's kind of his original look. He was known as the Gold Avenger for a long time because he walked around in a giant gold suit of metal. Yeah,
I remember his old look.
Yeah. Iron Man would continue to exist in Tales of Suspense and Avengers until Tales of Suspense issue 88 in 1968. The series would be renamed Captain America, and soon the now dubbed Golden Avenger would lose his original bulky suit and don his iconic appearance we know today in 1968 in Iron Man issue number 1, where he would battle against the villain Whiplash and the evil organization known as AIM.
Never heard of that.
Oh, you have. They're in a movie. They're in Iron Man 3. They're the bad guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Advanced Idea Mechanics, a think tank organization.
Oh.
Yeah.
How do I not remember the name?
They really did it dirty. We'll talk about that. So Iron Man 3 is not in this episode, but when we do part 2, we'll talk about how I think that was done so terribly.
Right.
So Iron Man would continue on for years, including the introduction of another hero in his series, beloved by fans, James Rhodes, aka War Machine, aka Rhodey, in Iron Man 118 in 1979. War Machine would become known as Iron Man's sidekick when he gets his own suit of gray and silver armor, which would use a large array of military-like weapons such as chain guns and missiles because he is a lieutenant colonel in the military. So, that's the comic background for this movie. Iron Man was a pretty popular 60s character, but in the 70s and 80s kind of fell off. He wasn't as big anymore.
I remember having an action figure of him in the 90s but kind of not really caring that much about it. Like I would oftentimes substitute the Iron Man action figure as a random character that I would make up for my other characters to fight.
Yeah, I mean, he looks cool. So
right.
it's easy. It's an easy sell for kids, I think, because of the way he looks.
Yeah, definitely.
And the Tony Stark persona is so great for everyone to just kind of attach to. Because he's such a dick bag, but such a great guy, you know.
Yeah, like he's a dirtbag with a heart of gold, which is not a terrible personality thing.
Yeah,
hard to be around personally to him, but he'll help you out, you know.
Yeah. So now we're gonna go on to the movie. Yeah. In 2008, the first movie of the MCU would be created by Jon Favreau under the guidance of Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige is still the overseer of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's right. He is kind of the guy who makes sure all these stories make sense and connect. It's his mastermindery that has made these work. So big props to Kevin Feige. He's a great creative planner and director for all this. And so this movie would see Robert Downey Jr. play Tony Stark, going against the Ironmonger, played by Jeff Bridges. But also important to note that Gwyneth Paltrow would be introduced in this as Pepper Potts, which was in this movie basically a secretary, kind of starting to crush on each other, but not yet, you know. And this would also have Terrence Howard as James Rhodes.
That's right.
What
a different casting choice they were. Although I love Don Cheadle, don't get me wrong. Yeah. Cheadle is the man. So.
Yeah, I'm glad they changed it. He wouldn't become War Machine in this film, but this did introduce him as a character. Yep. And then Jon Favreau is in the movie himself playing Happy Hogan, which is Tony's bodyguard and one of the greatest characters in the entire MCU.
Agreed. I fucking love Happy.
So, the plot of this movie would see Tony Stark visiting the Middle East to show off a new weapon he's trying to sell to the U.S. military, but he soon gets kidnapped on the road by a mysterious terrorist organization known as the Ten Rings. When he was attacked and captured, he was severely wounded and had small metal fragments in his body which were flowing towards his heart, which would kill him. And since the Ten Rings wanted Tony to make weapons for him, in an effort to keep him alive, they used a kidnapped doctor named Yinsen to fit an electromagnet powered by a car battery in his chest, which kept the scraps from moving into his heart, which forced Tony to carry a battery around with him everywhere. But, sure enough, Tony Stark, in a cave with a box of scraps, builds an arc reactor, which is like a small little self-sustaining energy source, which was invented by his father, and is the key to the success of Stark Industries. And he places it in a cavity in his chest to stop the shards from reaching his heart, and he then uses the same scraps to build a large metal suit powered by the arc reactor to smash his way out of the cave, which he finds his doctor friend who saved his life dying, and then, in a rage fit, burns down the Ten Rings weapons and their whole building and flies off, crashing into the sand where he would eventually be found by none other than James Rhodes and rescued.
Yeah, it's a really, honestly, great scene. Probably one of the best scenes in the movie is that whole sequence.
Yeah, the intro sequence is great. It's very sad to see Yinsen get killed, the doctor who saved him, and he kind of loses it. And it's important just for people to understand the suit he builds in that cave is his original suit in the comics.
Yes,
it looks almost identical. So he's got this big bulky metal suit that it falls apart in the desert, so he loses it right then.
Yeah, once he crashes it, he just kind of bleh. What's also great is like this is for his as a character, like this is when he starts shifting his mind from like, hey, I don't really want to make bombs anymore.
Yep. I have here, that's literally what I said. Upon arriving back in the States, he promptly announces that Stark Industries will immediately cease weapons manufacturing and begin focusing on energy sources using arc reactor technology.
That's like if Lockheed Martin or Raytheon decided to stop and do energy
exactly.
stuff.
Like, you know what? We just made a reactor that's going to save everybody tons of money and make the world a better place instead of making guns. That's literally what happened.
Yeah.
This is when we meet his father's old partner, Obadiah Stane. He is telling Tony this is going to be the company's downfall. It's a terrible idea. Tony doesn't give any heed to his warning and secretly builds his first red and gold Iron Man suit and uses it to defend the home village of Yinsen in Afghanistan as it's being attacked by the same Ten Rings terrorist organization that captured him. And he has a very successful first outing. Stops terrorists, but he does get the attention of the world. Everyone kind of looking at him.
Oh, yeah.
Pepper Potts discovers around this time that Obadiah Stane had hired the Ten Rings to kill Tony. But then the plan failed when the Ten Rings decided they would gain more by having him make weapons for them instead of killing him. Pepper Potts then meets a government agent for a mysterious organization called S.H.I.E.L.D. named Phil Coulson. And after that, he tells him the activities of Obadiah Stane. And unable to duplicate the miniature arc reactor Tony made in a cave with a box of scraps, Obadiah Stane gets mad and makes his own suit, which is huge due to not having an arc reactor power it, and becomes the supervillain known as Ironmonger, who then attacks Tony to try to kill him, but it backfires as he falls into the exploding arc reactor at Stark Industries and dies. After the battle, Tony Stark publicly states that he is the superhero Iron Man on the news, and the movie ends with the first famous post-Marvel credit scene that we all love, where you meet S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury, played by Samuel Jackson, who tells Tony that he is not the only superhero, and he wants to discuss something called the Avengers Initiative.
That's something that I loved about the first movie was everything was very believable. Because like the superhero movies that we were coming off of in that time were like The Dark Knight and stuff like that, where like it was very realistic and gritty and everything like that. So the first villain was just another guy in a suit. It wasn't something from space. It wasn't some crazy alien shit. It was just his partner.
Yeah, it was his old business partner who just copied him to try to fight him.
Right. Exactly. So it was, and that makes it as a writer, especially to start off this genuinely, like if they tried to drop the Thor movie right away, it would have not have done
100%.
Because the Thor movie was fucking
great.
When we get to liked the first Thor
when
movie,
we get to Thor, I brought that up at the end of the Thor little thing. So the next part is my reaction looking back, and yours. So as a comic book reader and a fan, when I saw this movie in 2008 in the theaters, I was fucking amazed. I was so amazed by how high quality the acting and the effects were compared to every other superhero movie at the time. Like that Marvel had made, like Ghost Rider and Daredevil recently, you know? Like that was this movie was on another level. And it was much easier to compare to DC's big hit, which just came out a couple years prior to this, Batman Begins. Yeah. Looking at this now, I think it's a really bad call to make Ironmonger the villain. I think it was weird. So this character, Ironmonger, wasn't even introduced until 1982. He's a very weird choice. He's kind of an oddball villain and not what people would consider to be like a nemesis of Iron Man.
Sure.
And if I was asked, I wouldn't say he was worthy to be the first villain of the movie. I would have thrown out Crimson Dynamo. They could have made him not Soviet. They could have made him like some guy trying to restore Soviets. I don't know. Or like a rival tech company like he is in the comics. But it's just like, it's, I don't know. I mean, that being said, Jeff Bridges did a fantastic job playing him. And I'm glad he's there. He's done. Ironmonger's dead. He's not coming back. At least not as Stane.
Yeah. I mean, like I said before, it's like I thought it was a good choice for a villain because it was such an easy to fit into the plot. You know what I mean? It was such an easy little stick. And because, like you said, he's not that great of a villain, just take care of him in one movie, hands clean, all set.
Yeah, you know that is the good side. Like Ironmonger's gone. We don't have to worry anything about Ironmonger again. Crimson Dynamo is it's interesting. He was never introduced because now it's a little too late for that. but you know, we'll talk more about that Crimson Dynamo stuff when we get to Iron Man 2. So what did you think when this movie came out?
Well, I remember hearing about it from like other people. I remember being in biology, to be specific. Actually, we were all broken off into groups doing biology, and then this kid named Keegan was like, came up to me and was like, "Dude, you're a nerd," and I was like, "Thanks." And he's just like, "Have you seen the new Iron Man movie yet?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I haven't. I haven't really been that interested in it." And he goes, "Dude, you fucking gotta go see it." And I was like, "All right, fine." So I went to go see it that weekend, and I remember just being like, oh, this is really good. Because like you mentioned before, it had a level of acting that superhero movies didn't have yet. It was like, because that's something that I don't think people oftentimes consider. And I'm not going to say that all the acting in all the Marvel movies is great, because there's a lot of stuff that's not great throughout the MCU in terms of acting quality. But Robert Downey Jr. was born to play Tony Stark. So like when you have that person in the role, when you have somebody like, I don't personally like appreciate Gwyneth Paltrow's real life adventures.
Yes. Yeah, she's fantastic. She's a great actress. And I'll always say that.
Actress.
I don't like what she does with her business in life, but I like that her acting side is fantastic. She's a great Pepper Potts. Yeah,
she's a great Pepper.
Yeah. Pepper Potts. Pepper Potts would never sell goop.
No, never. And although I did remember watching an interview with her once, basically saying that she has absolutely no idea what's going on at any time during the MCU movies. Like she just kind of shows up, does her shit, and leaves. Yeah,
she's so like which I mean, she does a good enough job. So if it works, it works. You know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. You don't have to be in love with the movies that you make, I guess. You could just get the paycheck and leave. But what's also nice about shifting more to the character of Pepper Potts, it felt like there was a love interest female character that actually had shit to do.
Yes.
Because she was like investigating what was going on with, fuck, I already forgot his name.
Obadiah Stane, yeah.
Yeah, Obadiah Stane, yeah.
She is not a damsel in distress character.
No. And that's great. Because I think a lot of people are genuine. I think our entire society is sick and tired of damsel in distress characters.
Yeah. Also, so would Tony Stark wouldn't be into that. That's not a Tony Stark compatible character. You know, he wouldn't have a damsel in distress character in his life.
He would have somebody who is just as intelligent as him in a different way, which is exactly what Pepper Potts is. Like she's just as intelligent, just in a different way. Yeah.
So, first movie's down. Now we go to the second movie, which already is the first bump in the road.
I liked it.
So in the same year, we had The Incredible Hulk, which was directed by Louis Leterrier, Edward Norton, starring Edward Norton, Liv Tyler, Tim Roth, William Hurt, and Tim Blake Nelson as some of the main characters.
It was fun.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I do like this movie.
Yeah.
The Incredible Hulk would introduce the very famous Marvel superhero, the Hulk. The Hulk was very well known around the world at this time. And he even had, this is actually the second Hulk movie, because only 5 years before this, the movie Hulk came out, which we are not talking about.
We should, though, because it's fucking wild.
It's a wild, horrible movie. But this movie really, really did Hulk right. It showed a better way to do Hulk.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
So going back to the Hulk in the comics, Hulk was once again created by the dynamic duo of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who would be based on a combination of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Frankenstein, and the Golem of Jewish mythology.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
He's even based on fellow Marvel superhero The Thing from Fantastic Four.
Right.
He would be appearing in The Incredible Hulk #1, dated May 1962, and in the issue, the cover writing even stated, "Is he a man, a monster, or both?" Which is pretty much the entire that line is the entire plot of Hulk to this day. In the comic, we would see a scientist named Dr. Bruce Banner be exposed to gamma radiation from a secret bomb test due to him saving the life of a young man named Rick Jones, who was near the bomb site, which was a secret, so he had no way of knowing.
Right.
So Bruce Banner runs out and saves the kid, and the radiation would transform him into a large, gray, monstrous form who would refer to himself as the Hulk, who has super strength and toughness, able to have bullets bounce off his skin and throw cars with ease. After the first issue, the skin color would be changed to green, that we know now. without explanation. They just decided gray wasn't that great. I actually did see why. So in the original art of the comic, there's a lot of like light. You know how like in comics sometimes they draw lighting in weird colors to make cool contrast looks?
Yeah.
They did green contrast lighting on his gray skin, and the artists are like, oh, this looks better. Like he looks better green. So they made him green.
He does look good green.
Which is a big deal because in comic color theory, green is a villain color. So he was the first, and he had purple pants. Green and purple are villain colors. So he used the villain color scheme, which is like greens and yellows and purples.
Well, that works for him too because again, he's the unknown.
Exactly.
He's a good guy, but he's the unknown good guy.
Is he a monster? I don't know.
Yeah.
So the big like we were just talking about, the big catch with Hulk, opposed to other heroes of his time, was his lack of control. Bruce Banner would transform into a monster he couldn't fully control whenever he got mad, basically becoming rage personified. And this imperfection was what made him popular with readers. This was the first hero that wasn't just a hero, you know?
Right, yeah.
He really had
Which I
issues.
love, too, yeah.
Brings a bit more realism to him. He's not like a Boy Scout superhero. Yeah. His solo series, however, would be very short-lived, only lasting 6 issues, which would be canceled in March 1963. Hulk would continue to appear, however, immediately after that in Fantastic Four number 12 in the same month, and then show up as a founding member of the Avengers in that same year. He would continue to appear in Fantastic Four and even show up in The Amazing Spider-Man number 14 in 1964. A small series called Tales to Astonish would release with a 2-part Hulk-focused run in June of 1965, introducing his major villains Abomination and the Leader. The success of those 2 stories would end up changing the title of the series to Incredible Hulk, Volume 2, and would be the main Hulk run until 1999. Wow. But back in 1977 was when Hulk was changed forever and turned into an international icon, after 2 Hulk television films starring Lou Ferrigno would release to the best reviews any television movie had ever received, and leading it to being a full-blown series on television airing from 1978 to 1982 with huge ratings and being the most viewed show for 3 years straight.
I didn't know that. I knew it was a big show, but Jesus,
it
really?
It was huge. And so there's another part of that too. The Incredible Hulk in towns like LA where we live in a land that's very movie and show centric. People talk about this kind of stuff. It was the talk of the town. Every day was, did you see last night's Hulk? You know, that's awesome. Like what it was every week. Like, did you see the Red Hulk? That was incredible. Like, that's wild. Like all stuff like that. Like, it was like so popular. It was kind of that. It was like a pulpy action show on television that really just hit with people.
Love it.
And this series would also introduce the catchphrase, "Don't make me angry. You won't like me when I'm angry."
That's honestly a great fucking line. It's so good, man.
That was where it comes from. It comes from that show. Yeah, it is cheesy, but I mean, you got to hear it. Like he says it in the movie, you know, like you got to hear it.
Oh yeah.
So this show transformed this obscure character with no power other than being strong and mad into an international sensation, and the Hulk actually became the flagship character of Marvel for the late 70s, early 80s.
That's like such an obscure choice, but it's perfect.
Yeah, so now we know. Today, I think like the best thing to say, it's hard to say flagship character, but like just Avengers, I think is now what's known for. But for a long time, it was the Hulk, and then before that, it was like, or after that, I should say, it was like Spider-Man. You know, even today, Spider-Man's face is still just the icon for Marvel on some things. Yeah, like you know, Spider-Man's just huge. So, but for a little while, it was Hulk. Hulk was the big Marvel character. The comics would tell stories of Hulk through the ages as he ran from General Ross, as well as his romance with General Ross's daughter, Betty Ross, and even their eventual wedding, her eventual death. You know, the Hulk is still one of Marvel's biggest superheroes of this day, and he would enter the MCU as second film, which is kind of a flat movie. It's exactly what you think it's going to be, which is just Hulk smash. But it's a fun time. You know, if you're watching the MCU, you can skip it. Because the Hulk does get reintroduced with enough of his 2-sentence origin that you never need to see this movie.
Yeah, it's true.
But I recommend seeing it. I think it's worth it. Also, the Hulk does get recast, which is an important note. Yes. So
I do like their recasting. I like both.
100%.
Like Edward Norton was great. He was a fine choice or whatever. But like I definitely love my God, what
Mark
the hell is his
Ruffalo.
name? Mark Ruffalo. Yeah, I love Mark Ruffalo because he has such a nice like temperament about him when he's Bruce. You know,
he's such a good Bruce Banner. That's the I think he's a better Bruce Banner Doctor than Edward Norton is.
Right. Yeah, has a very quiet sound to him. You know.
Yeah, Edward Norton seems like he's kind of going to stab me. So, the second movie would release the same year as the first, 2008. This one would be directed by Louis Leterrier of the Transport series and its sequel at the time. The movie starred Edward Norton as Bruce Banner and the Hulk, co-starring Liv Tyler as Betty Ross, and it brought us William Hurt as General Ross. Rest in peace. He just passed away a couple months ago.
That's right.
Going against the Abomination, played by Tim Roth, and showing the origin of the other major Hulk villain, the Leader, played by Tim Blake Nelson. Not to mention the great talent of the voice of the Hulk as Lou Ferrigno, reprising his role from the 77 Hulk movies and show.
Which was, what a good idea.
Yeah, he still is. He's still the voice of Hulk.
Yeah.
So this movie starts with Bruce Banner recalling the events in which he was transformed into a monster and sent his lover Betty Ross to the hospital in his rage transformation. Her father, General Thaddeus Ross, forced Banner to go on the run for years after this, as he is now a fugitive running from the American army. Banner would live in Rocinha, I believe it's pronounced, Rocinha, Brazil, working as a factory worker bottling soft drinks with the help of a man named Mr. Blue, who he talked to online, who taught him a Zen breathing technique to control the Hulk, and he had not had an incident in 5 years. However, a cut on his finger lets his gamma-infected blood get into the bottle of a soda, which results in a woman in Milwaukee, Wisconsin dying from drinking it due to radiation poisoning, which leads General Ross picking up the trail and leading him to Brazil. He sends in a Spec Ops expert commando force led by Emil Blonsky to capture Dr. Banner. Banner runs from them successfully, but during the event bumps into a former co-worker and thug who appears to have harassed him in the past, had a bad history with him, and when he tries to mug him in real life, he transforms into the Hulk. After killing all the soldiers and the thugs, the one last survivor being Blonsky, who then is last seen getting a forklift thrown at him by the Hulk, which hits him, but he barely survives. Banner makes his way back to the States, where Betty Ross recovers him, and he becomes a delivery boy for a pizza place, while staying at a university in hiding. You then see a rather important scene where Blonsky tells General Ross that a green monster allowed for Banner to escape, where Banner's origin story is told, and he is described as the monster as a result of a failed super soldier program.
Huh.
That's going to come up later. Blonsky volunteers to receive a small altered dose of this super soldier serum to increase his strength and agility, and he then attacks Banner at the university he's hiding at, but is defeated once again by the Hulk. Banner and Betty go to New York City and meet the mysterious Mr. Blue, who is revealed to be a man named Samuel Stearns. He then has an antidote which Banner then takes and reverts the Hulk back into Bruce Banner, and it is revealed that Stearns has been mass-producing this and intends to use it as to usher in the next stage of human evolution by making everyone gamma-radiated.
Classic villain plot.
Banner tries to stop him, but is hit by a tranquilizer from General Ross and is taken into custody, where Blonsky gets a sample of his blood from Stearns to add to his power. At this time is also when Stearns is seen being given gamma radiation himself. His head starts to swell up, and it's revealed he's the leader. But that's the last we'll see of him ever so far, unfortunately.
Right.
So when Stearns takes this gamma-radiated blood, it turns him into the main nemesis of the Hulk, the Abomination. A-Bomb then goes on a rampage through Harlem looking for a fight, which results in Ross giving Banner permission to fight A-Bomb to stop him, where Banner, who can't get the Hulk out due to the antidote, decides to jump out of a helicopter to try to force it out, which works as the Hulk comes out to stop him from dying, and the final fight begins with the Hulk coming out on top, destroying most of Harlem in the process, but is allowed to be on the run after he is seen protecting both Betty and General Ross during the fight from harm's way. You catch up with him a month later in British Columbia, Canada, where he is learning to control the Hulk instead of cure him, and then you see Tony Stark talking to General Ross about putting a team together.
Dun, 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 dun. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that was the movie plot of The Incredible Hulk. So now you don't need to watch it if you don't want to.
Yeah, again, it's like you said earlier, it's a very simple movie because it's the Hulk. He gets mad, he smashes shit. People want to catch him, he smashes them. There's a bad guy, he smashes that.
Yeah, just he doesn't lose ever the whole movie, which is great.
Yeah,
The Incredible Hulk at the time, this is my reaction and us looking back part. I was a fan of the movie. And not only being a fan of Hulk in general, just being a Marvel comic fan, but also being surprised how good it was compared to the previous Hulk movie.
Oh, yeah.
Like, seeing the Hulk transform and look more real into this vibrant green creature. And Lou Ferrigno does the voice just perfect. Like, it's just, you just feel like it's right, like it's Hulk.
Yeah.
I didn't like it as much as Iron Man, though.
No, I mean, because it wasn't as good as Iron Man, but like, again, it was nice to introduce the character, and I'm sure you're going to bring it up later, but like in the Avengers, they do a kind of a good job after they recast him to kind of go over what happened in a very brief, cute way.
They do it very quickly, where it's like, it's also kind of like at that time we kind of know who the Hulk is, so it's like he's a very popular character. Like you can look up his origin, you know.
Yeah. It'd be really surprising if people were like, "Wait, who's this guy?"
Yeah, exactly. Everyone knows who the Hulk is.
Yeah.
But looking back, I do think it is a shame we never got a sequel. I know legally why we can't get a sequel because Universal owns the rights to it.
Right.
But the biggest shame is we have not seen Samuel Stern's the leader come back.
Right. Yeah.
Like we just haven't seen. He's a great leader. He'd be a great villain for like an Avengers movie. Even like he's a pretty big guy. He could come back though. A-Bomb is for sure who I would have picked for the main villain of the first movie. They did that great. Like,
of course.
Abomination is Hulk's like number one villain, and he's just another Hulk. So they're very even fight all the time. Right. And I'm glad he was established. We did get to see him again recently. He had a short cameo in Shang-Chi.
That's right, he did.
Yeah, so we got to see a little redesigned really too to look like comic Abomination over weird skeleton one from this movie, which is great.
Yeah,
she looks great in Shang-Chi. You see him in the fighting arena, and he's just a big. He's got his little webbed ears that he has in the comics. Like he looks perfect.
Yeah, Shang-Chi was great too.
Great movie. Yeah, I love that movie. So this movie is great because it is a solid Hulk origin story. But if you're planning to, like, I'm going to watch all the MCU in order, and you want to, like, maybe cherry pick some, this does not need to be in that list. You could take it out.
I've done the, at least phase 1 over again at least, like, 3 times in my life.
And
I've
skipped it. Yeah, exactly. I'm the same way. I'd be like, I'll skip the Hulk. You know, we don't really need it.
Yeah. I don't need it.
So that's going to bring us on to movie 3. Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2 would come out 2 years later. So there's a lot more development and filming time in Iron Man 2. Which is directed once again by Jon Favreau. It's the third movie in the MCU. It would be the first of many sequels to movies within the MCU itself. Iron Man returns to fight against a new villain with the same star cast and director. So, because we already went over Iron Man in the comics, I figured this is a great time to go over some other characters in the comics during this.
The
ones that show up in this one. We already got War Machine Iron Man's comic origin down, so I'm going to be going over Black Widow and Nick Fury.
Yay.
Starting with Nick Fury. Nick Fury started off in a comic that was a World War II combat comic called Sergeant Fury and His Howling Commandos, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, again. He would be a cigar-chomping NCO who led a radical, racial, and ethnically diverse elite unit of commandos. This series started in May of 1963 and went all the way to 1974. The comic would show the Howling Commandos working alongside the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, Agent Reed Richards, who would return later as Mr. Fantastic, as the Fantastic Four, and who would also fight alongside Captain America and his sidekick Bucky. They would even return in an annual comic called The Howlers and fight in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. In Strange Tales number 135 in August of 1965, we saw post-World War II Fury as a colonel, and he would become a James Bond-like Cold War spy as a covert agent for a secret organization known as SHIELD, aka Supreme Headquarters for International Espionage Law Enforcement Division. So that sounds wrong.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right.
It's because they've changed it over the years. Now it's Strategic Homeland of Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, back then, that was S.H.I.E.L.D. And he'd go against the evil counterpart of S.H.I.E.L.D. called Hydra. His comic was very popular, as this was the rise of the spy versus spy era. And readers would see stories with intense sensuality. And he even had his own Bond girls in every issue, which pushed the boundaries of what was allowed by what we covered in the Batman episode, the Comics Code. If you remember, the censorship division. Nick Fury was the number one thing pushing that barrier and starting to make them start to give up some of their restrictions because of how popular it was.
How sexy it was.
Yeah, basically. He would remain in that comic until Strange Tales 1/68, sharing a book with an occult character known as Doctor Strange. Soon, he would split into his own book, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., for 15 issues. Fury would make non-stop appearances in other heroes and Avengers comics until the modern day, with his only other solo series being Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Volume 2, which would last 47 issues from 89 to 93.
That's cool.
Nick Fury is known to many readers as the enigmatic hero in the shadows, doing all he can to save humanity no matter the cost. There would even be a 1998 horrible film called Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., starring David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury.
Oh, God.
Which would be... Oh, did you not know about this movie?
I've never heard of it.
Oh, God. It is a travesty of cinema.
Oh, man. Okay. David Hasselhoff is Nick fucking... That's
it's
terrible casting choice.
It's another legendary failure of Marvel in the 90s in cinema. The only thing that made Marvel stand out in its early days was Blade. Every other thing they made was horrifying.
Jesus Christ.
So the Nick Fury we know today is actually a different Nick Fury from the side universe called the Ultimates, where he is African American and based off in art of Samuel L. Jackson.
Right.
He was designed to look like him and behave like him, and thankfully he would end up playing him in the movies.
Good casting.
Yeah, so he literally was designed off of Samuel L. Jackson. So, it's great. But the original Nick Fury was a white man. In the he's that's the David Hasselhoff version. That version existed in the comics, kind of still does in some weird ways, but the Nick Fury we know and love is Samuel L. Jackson, and he's basically that in the comics now too.
Yeah, there was a game that came out, I think over a decade ago. I think it was for the 360. It was a Marvel game. It was a top-down
Ultimate
kind of thing.
Ultimate Alliance, yeah.
Yeah, and Nick Fury was in that, and he was the white guy. He was the white Nick Fury.
Yeah, because
and I didn't like that because I knew him as Samuel Jackson.
Yeah, same.
I was like, why is he white?
Same. In the comics, there's a big event where the Ultimates universe is now gone and it merged with ours, which brought over a lot of characters, including this Nick Fury and Miles Morales. So, characters like that, they're in the main world now. There is both, I think, in the main world. The old white Nick Fury is like this weird, ascended space being now. It's fucking weird. Anyway, that's the end of the Nick Fury coverage. Now we're going to Black Widow. So, Black Widow was introduced as a non-costumed Russian spy as a villain in Tales of Suspense number 52 in 1964 as part of the Iron Man feature. She would then recruit the costumed archer Clint Barton to fight against Iron Man, also known as Hawkeye, who was a circus performer. So, Hawkeye and Black Widow were originally Iron Man villains.
That's fun.
She would get a Black Widow costume from the Soviet government with a high-tech weapon setup, including her famous Widow Bites, but would soon defect to the U.S. after it's revealed in Avengers number 29 that she was brainwashed against the U.S. against her will. She would then be a frequent ally of the Avengers and end up joining them as their 16th member years later.
Wow, she really raised up the ranks in the modern day stuff because she was the
original.
One of the
She's original,
members. Yeah.
Her updated costume would appear in 1970 in The Amazing Spider-Man number 86, because, spider theme.
Makes sense.
So in July 1970, her shoulder-length red hair and her black suit known for today would be introduced, and she would actually fight Spider-Man in that comic, but then end up being, good by the end, as it usually happens.
Sure.
Her own feature would be in Amazing Adventures from August of 1970 to September 1971, a book shared with the Inhumans. She would continue on to co-star in Daredevil for 4 years, where the book would actually change its title to Daredevil and Black Widow from 1971 to 1975. Throughout the 80s and 90s, she would be featured as a main Avenger, as well as a freelance S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. And she wouldn't get her own solo series until 2010, which is still going today, due to her large growth in popularity following Iron Man 2.
Right.
So...
That's cool.
Yeah, Black Widow was an extremely D-list unknown character. Like, she was a nobody. No one knew who she was. Iron Man 2 introduced her and rose her. Oh, she's so good. We'll talk about my opinion on Black Widow after this, but she's great.
Right.
So let's just get into the movie. This one, because this is a bit of a longer plot, because it's kind of a bit to go over. Iron Man 2 was directed by Jon Favreau again, who he returns to Happy Hogan, of course. And stars Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, Gwyneth Paltrow's Pepper Potts, Terrence Howard, which for the record was his decision because he thought the movie would fail, dipped out and got recast as Don Cheadle to play his relative. Yeah,
go Don.
Yeah, what a decision.
Shoot himself in the foot for
absolutely. So he would be playing as Brody, who would see his debut as War Machine in this film. And this would introduce Scarlett Johansson as her legendary MCU role as Natasha Romanoff, a.k.a. the Black Widow. Samuel L. Jackson would return to play a bigger role in this movie as Nick Fury compared to the previous one where he was just a little cameo.
Right.
Alongside Clark Gregg, again, who would have played another bigger role as Agent Phil Coulson. And they would go against Mickey Rourke playing legendary Iron Man villain Whiplash as Ivan Vanko. So... this movie starts off in Russia with the media showing Tony Stark announcing the world he's Iron Man, and this shows a sickly old man in his bed, which is revealed to be Anton Vanko, which I mentioned earlier as the Crimson Dynamo.
Right.
So this introduces him as old dying guy who hates Tony Stark for some reason. Which comic fans, I mean, when this was revealed, like me, were like, "Oh my god, that's the fucking Crimson Dynamo." Like that's him. He was dying in the arms of his son Ivan Vanko, telling him that he has knowledge to leave to him, which were blueprints for the arc reactor. He tells his son that he has every right to the success of Tony Stark, which motivates him to take revenge on Tony, kind of making you doubt Tony's dad and kind of like, why does this Russian guy have the plans too? If his dad made it, I don't know. This is kind of weird.
Right.
6 months later, Tony is operating as Iron Man to protect people and is pretty famous as it. He reopens the Stark Expo, a World's Fair ripoff basically, endorsing young inventors and inventions to benefit the world. As he leaves the stage, he notices his blood is becoming toxic and he has damaged veins around his chest that look very black and gross.
Yeah.
He gets summoned by a Senate Armed Forces Committee who is worried about the existence of Iron Man and the threat he poses. Stark refuses to hand over the suit because he can't, because it's powered by his chest reactor. He's saying it's officially part of him and he can't hand over his own person.
I like that scene, actually, a lot. That was a good scene.
And since they can't physically take him, he is acquitted of anything that could have happened. He proves that the powers have failed to replicate this around the world and smears Justin Hammer, his corporate rival, in the process.
Yeah.
When he gets home, which, by the way, Sam Rockwell, perfect Justin Hammer.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
He's so good. When he gets home, Jarvis, his AI, confirms that his toxic blood level is rising and the arc reactor is the cause. Stark, thinking he will soon die, makes a woman named Natalie Rushman his new assistant, and Pepper Potts, CEO of Stark Industries, thinking he's going to be dead soon. At the Monaco Grand Prix, where he meets Elon Musk, he drives the Stark Industries car himself instead of letting the driver drive it, for seeking Phyllis before he dies, but during the race is attacked by none other than Whiplash. Ivan Vanko is in a whip-based exoskeleton kind of suit powered by an arc reactor.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Tony uses the Mark IV armor, the Mark IV T armor, I think it's called, his little portable armor, to defeat Vanko, and aka Whiplash. I'm just calling Whiplash versus the rest of this.
That's fine.
Whiplash gets arrested, where it is revealed to be his father, Anton Vanko, was a Russian physicist who collaborated on the first arc reactor with his father, Howard Stark, but betrayed him in the past and lost all rights to the process. Whiplash is broken out of prison by Justin Hammer, who wants to use him to make Iron Man suits to get revenge on Stark Industries. Tony throws a lavish last birthday party thinking he's going to die, where he gets drunk wearing his Mark IV Iron Man suit and begins to endanger the guests. To which Lieutenant Colonel James Rhodey Rhodes equips the old Mark II silver suit to subdue Tony. The next day, Nick Fury arrives to give him a box of his father's old research, which includes information to help him find a cure for his palladium poisoning, and also Captain America's shield, and also reveals his new unfinished version, trying to replicate it.
I remember that. I can remember this whole movie, yeah.
And also reveals his new secretary, Natalie Rushman, is actually Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. Tony ends up discovering a new element out of nowhere and uses it to make a perfect arc reactor and cures himself of poisoning, and learns Hammer was involved with Whiplash and rushes to the expo where Hammer reveals military drones that look like Iron Man suits controlled by Rhodey in a heavily modified version of the Mark II armor known as the War Machine. Whiplash is revealed to have the ability to take control of them all, including the War Machine suit, which he does, where Tony then battles in his Iron Man Mark IV suit against the drones and Rhodey until the connection is broken, while Black Widow and Happy go to the Hammer Industries to stop Whiplash, but are too late, and he has already left in a newly made, stronger suit, the Ironmonger Mark II. Freed by Tony, Iron Man and War Machine work together and take down Whiplash, and the drones self-destruct. Afterwards, Fury tells him that he is unsuitable for the Avengers Initiative, and S.H.I.E.L.D. wants him as a consultant. Stark agrees, and him and Rhodey get medals for bravery. The end scene shows Agent Phil Coulson at a remote crater in New Mexico, where he's revealed to have found a strange hammer.
Weird.
And that's the end of Iron Man 2. So, my reaction to this movie back then is I thought it was even better than the first one. I still do. I think Iron Man 2 is a better movie than the original.
I do too.
Whiplash is done great. War Machine looks fantastic. I like Whiplash as a more iconic villain. Also, the fact that Whiplash in the comics does become Ironmonger. They threw that in at the end by giving him an Ironmonger suit. Which he does die at the end, along with the Ironmonger suit, and that's the last time we ever see or hear of Ironmonger.
That's fine.
Yeah, we're good with that.
Closure's okay. I agree. I think the second one was better.
Yeah, they also did a great reference to the alcoholic phase of Tony Stark. Because in the comics, for a long time, he was a very abusive alcoholic. There's even a famous intervention comic where the Avengers have an intervention with him to get him to stop drinking. And they kind of referenced that in his, like, I'm going to die, so let's party mindset of him in this whole movie.
Yeah.
Which was a very real and visceral situation to see a superhero win.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, one of the biggest things to me in this movie was the introduction of Black Widow, who has since become one of my favorite Marvel characters of all time. I fucking adore the Black Widow as a character. I love spy stuff. I'm a big fan of that, and she's such a great way to, like, bring that into the comics.
Also, one of her introductions to fighting was fantastic when when he just turns to Pepper and is like, I want one.
Yeah.
She just kicks so much ass.
Yes. She's so good in the movie. And Scarlett Johansson is a great cast for it's hard for me to imagine anyone else doing it.
What's funny is too, though, that ironically set her off to being a very deadpan, not that great quote unquote actress, when in reality, Scarlett Johansson's really fucking good. Like, if you've seen movies like Jojo Rabbit or that movie she did with Adam Driver, I forget what it's called. Like, she actually uses her acting chops and you're like, oh wait, she's really fucking good. And if you see those movies and then go back and watch her Avengers movies and like other movies that she was in the MCU, you can see so much more subtlety in her acting, and you're like, oh, she doesn't suck at all. Like, she's actually really good. Yeah,
she's a fantastic actress. She was just only Black Widow, I feel like, for so many people. It's kind of what happened.
Right, exactly. And to be fair, Black Widow is supposed to be a very emotionally like contained person.
She's kind of she's like a brainwashed spy. Like, she's not like super in it.
She's not the Hulk. Or Tony Stark, eccentric.
She was supposed to be played by Emily Blunt originally.
Really?
Yeah. So that would have been a very different character. But yeah, she was great in the movie. Mickey Rourke is great in the movie. He does a great job.
Yep. Love Mickey Rourke.
This movie also kind of sets a lot of stepping stones for the MCU. Like, a lot of little things come back to this movie.
Yes. I mean, I remember a lot of people actually not liking this one that much, and people kind of like shit on Iron Man 2 a lot, and I never understood it. But I think in hindsight, looking back on it, I think the people who didn't like Iron Man 2 were the people who weren't as invested in the MCU, where like they liked Iron Man 1 better because it was a genuinely smaller and simpler contained story.
Yeah.
Whereas Iron Man 2 had a lot of open-ended, like, what is this going to mean?
Yeah, exactly. Iron Man 2, I was just talking to my friend Donald about this the other day. I was saying that Iron Man 2 is better than Iron Man 1 to me because it's a bigger world now. Like it's already like they know they're making these movies, like they're coming out, so they can start like doing these wild things, which has only gotten bigger as time goes on, and has like gotten like they're doing things in the MCU now that I never would have thought possible in 2010. Like I never would have dreamed they would have made a Moon Knight TV series. Like you know what I mean? Like that's just
even Doctor Strange.
Even Doctor Strange, yeah, even Doctor Strange, who's a major Marvel character back then, was such a far fetched. Like they're not gonna do a wizard.
Yeah,
here we are. Also, just for the record, people listening, we're recording this and doing this live on Twitch during the week after the release of Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness.
That's right.
So,
which I have not seen.
Yeah, which
so I have to.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and also kind of the inspiration for me to start doing these episodes.
Cool.
So we're gonna move on to the next movie, film number 4, which is none other than rhyming with 4, is Thor.
I loved it
In 2011, me too. This is directed by
shit on it because they were like it's cheesy. And I was like, fuck you.
This is directed by Kenneth Branagh and star Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, and Tom Hiddleston. This is the 4th installment that brings us Thor, a personal favorite of mine, and a great film that introduces the hero we didn't know we needed, Thor, played by Chris Hemsworth. Despite Marvel's butchery of classic Norse mythology that I love, I equally love the Marvel Norse mythology. Like they go side by side to me. I love them both. This movie was a big gamble at the time too, because it pulled away from the science heroes we had of the Hulk and Iron Man. It was
magic.
And it brought magic and gods into this world.
Yeah, that's what I loved about it. I mean, we'll get to what we loved about it, but like, God, it was such like a, and this, you know what I mean? Like, you see Iron Man and that's nice in the Hulk, and now you're seeing this. It's like, it was such a takeaway from what we saw already. It was very Shakespearean as well. Well,
we're going to talk about why in a moment. This, in the comics, we'll start there again as always. Thor made his debut into comics comic legend in a comic called Journey into Mystery, issue number 83 in 1962, made once again by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. This was a sci-fi and fantasy anthology comic that featured many wild stories, but Thor was the only one that ever really stuck. Stan Lee said that he wanted to make someone who was stronger than anyone they've ever made before and decided to just make a god. Pulling from the lesser-known Norse mythos, as opposed to popular Greek and Roman myths at the time, who did have a lot of characters in the comics, such as Hercules. Sure. He was a popular character in this same comic series. So Thor was actually first made by Kirby in Tales of Unexpected issue number 6 in 1957 under the DC Comics brand. But he looked very different and really wasn't the same character. It's just like that universe's Thor, I guess, you know? But Kirby wanted another chance at doing Thor, and he got a second chance to design him to make him look more superhero-like and less old legend-like. They decided to change the classic Norse mythology in an attempt to modernize the tales, such as making Loki the brother of Thor instead of the brother of Odin. The 13-page feature Thor would prove to be very popular and earn him a spot in the original roster of the Avengers in 1963. So he was a pretty popular character to be introduced into the Avengers, right? Like he was a founding Avengers member, with Hulk and Iron Man by his side. So by May 1964, Thor had become a prominent figure in another sci-fi series called Journey into Mystery, and soon the series would be just renamed to Thor, or sometimes The Mighty Thor, starting in issue number 126 in March of '66. Thor would continue to be a lesser-known but heavily niche hero, whose comics would take him across space in so many worlds of sci-fi and fantasy, from elves to aliens. Thor series would continue well into the 90s, and he would end up being removed from mainstream Marvel continuity, with some other characters as well, in a reimagined alternate universe that lasted 1 year. This was kind of done because he was too strong, and they removed him so other characters could shine in events at the time. But that fell apart, and he ended up coming back to the main universe, relaunching Thor Volume 2 in July of 1998, which would keep going until 2007, which is when Volume 3 would start. With Thor issue number 622 in August 2011, the comic would return to its original name, Journey into Mystery, prominently featuring Loki as the protagonist. This whole time, Thor was also heavily present in the Avengers. Thor will have many other series following his massive popularity from the MCU films, and today is one of the top-selling superheroes of all time, going from a lower C-lister to a S-lister and a fan favorite worldwide overnight. And just so you know, in comic sales right now, Thor is like number one for Marvel.
Oh, really?
Thor sells. Oh. Yeah, Thor sells a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah, apparently his mother's the Phoenix. Anyway, going into the movie, Thor, the movie, was directed by Kenneth Branagh, who is the actor currently portrayed as Poirot in the Agatha Christie's novels. The movies like, Death in the Nile, I think, just came out, and then Murder on the Orient Express a couple years ago.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So he's playing he plays Poirot in those movies. But he was known at the time of this movie for directing Shakespeare films. Pretty much all of them. All of the Shakespeare films in the 90s and early 2000s were this director. He made them all.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. Chris Hemsworth was starring in this movie as Thor, Natalie Portman playing his love interest Jane Foster, Anthony Hopkins would be in this film playing Odin,
good casting.
and the villain would be played by Tom Hiddleston, Thor's brother Loki. And often his most recurring villain from the comics as well. This movie also introduced Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. So, yeah, this is when he's introduced, just for a minute, but he's
he reaches over a gun and grabs a bow. And
yeah,
you're
like,
oh,
we're all like, oh, it's Hawkeye.
Yeah.
So the movie starts with Jane Foster and her co-workers, Eric Selvig and Darcy Lewis in New Mexico desert, working in a van trying to research Aurora Borealis happening in the area, which is weird. Suddenly, a tornado with lightning hits, and they hit a man from the side of the van, knocking him unconscious. Then the movie just cuts to black and goes to Odin, played by Anthony Hopkins, with a great storytelling voice, telling the story of Asgard battling the frost giants of Jotunheim in 965 BC. The giants use a magical artifact called the Casket of Ancient Winters, which has the ability to use the cold to freeze and kill hordes of people at a time. Asgard wins the battle, however, and takes possession of the Casket of Winters, which rests in Odin's vault. You then see Odin talking to his two sons, the energetic Thor and the quiet Loki. Odin says both are worthy, but only one can be king, which cuts to present-day Thor being recognized as the crown prince. In the only scene, unfortunately, we see him wearing his iconic winged helmet, which he looks great in that scene.
He does.
He looks great in that helmet. I wish I kept it.
Or brought it back.
They're bringing it back in the new one. So, that'll be good. I'm
right.
excited for that. So, you see 3 frost giants at the same time breach into Odin's vault before a giant metal monster known as the Destroyer arrives and destroys them. Thor gets upset and wants to attack the frost giants, which Odin forbids. Thor then immediately doesn't listen to his dad and gets his friends Volstagg, Fandral, Hogun, and Sif, known as Sif and the Warriors 3, and then his brother Loki, and they ride to Jotunheim where they confront the frost giants' leader Laufey, who taunts them, but Loki convinces Thor to peacefully leave. But soon a giant insults him, triggering Thor's temper, and he begins to kill them. A large fight breaks out until Odin rescues them and brings them back to Asgard. Odin then strips Thor of his hammer and his power, banishing him to Earth, which cuts to the beginning of the movie when he gets hit by the van.
Again, great way to introduce him to humans.
You also see Odin cast down Mjolnir to Earth as well, whispering into it, "He who holds his power be worthy of the power," or "He who holds his hammer be worthy of the power of Thor." So Jane Foster and his friends help out Thor despite not believing who he says he is, and despite his extremely outlandish behavior. The scientists return to find S.H.I.E.L.D., led by Phil Coulson, confiscating all their equipment and mention the discovery of a hammer in the desert. You then see S.H.I.E.L.D. take over the site of Mjolnir, and soon Thor tries to infiltrate it. Thor manages to get in and locate the hammer, but is being watched by Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, from above, as he grabs the hammer but gains no power from it, and is knocked unconscious. On Asgard, Sif and the Warriors 3 think Loki has something to do with Thor's banishment, and Loki discovers with the admittance of Odin that he is in fact not Odin's birth son, and is a frost giant who was rescued from Jotunheim as an infant. Confused and angry, Loki upsets Odin, leading him to fall into the Odin sleep, which makes Loki become acting king. On Earth, Coulson questions Thor, but Loki arrives to tell him Odin is dead, and he cannot ever come back to Asgard. Thor gets distraught and gets released under the care of Eric Selvig when they go out to a drink and get drunk and become friends.
I like that scene.
Loki then frees. Yeah, it's a great scene. But basically, it's like, you got to stay away from Jane. She likes you too much. And he's like, fuck you, I don't care. Let's get drunk.
Yeah.
He just disregards everything Eric tries to get him to do. Right. Loki freezes Heimdall with the casket of ancient winters and uses the Bifrost to beat Laufey. And it is revealed he was the one who let the Frost Giants into Asgard in the beginning to sabotage Thor's coronation. He makes a deal with them where he will let them into Asgard to kill Odin and have the casket, but that after that they will return home in peace and let Loki rule Asgard. Loki then sends the Destroyer to Earth to kill Thor. The Destroyer starts destroying New Mexico's town that they're in, just blasting everything in sight with a giant face laser. The Destroyer, by the way, is a major Thor villain. Like, he's a Thor character he always comes back. So it's kind of cool they brought him in here. Thor then confronts the Destroyer and asks Loki, who he knows hears him through it, to leave the humans alone in return for himself. The Destroyer then bitch slaps Thor across the entire town, and then Thor then gains back the power of Mjolnir due to his selflessness and rises to his classic costume and defeats the Destroyer pretty easily.
Yep.
He returns to Asgard, defeats the giants, and battles Loki, who is trying to use the Bifrost to destroy the entirety of Jotunheim. Thor ends up breaking the Rainbow Bridge, disabling the Bifrost, and tries to save Loki, but lets go of his staff instead of giving Thor the satisfaction of saving him, falling into the void of space. The end credit scene shows Nick Fury meeting Eric Selvig and showing him the Tesseract, a powerful object known as the Cosmic Cubes that comic fans have immediately recognized. Loki appears in a reflection invisible to both, who then says, "Well, I guess that's worth a look," which Selvig then repeats due to Loki's magical influence. So, reactions looking back. Before I saw this movie, my knowledge of Thor in the comics was extremely limited. I only really knew him as being extremely powerful and being Loki's brother. I had seen Loki in comics more than Thor. And this made me very interested in the movie because I wanted to know, we knew the Avengers was coming. Like, it was already a known thing. So, I wanted to really see Thor and learn more about him. And I came out of this movie with a glowing in smiles, I
loved it too. Yeah.
Yeah. They added humor to Thor, which is something that we only see get better as time goes on. It really helps when you're dealing with a space Norse god in modern day to add some silliness to it.
Yeah.
Looking back, I think the villain choice of story is perfect. I mean, you can't do a better starting villain than Loki. Throwing the Destroyer in there, like I mentioned before, is another great, because Destroyer is just an object, but it's something that Thor always has to fight constantly, is just Destroyers. So, Thor stands out as a very solid solo film in the MCU, but it is entirely the origin story of Thor and Loki, which is great. Yes. They got their own movie. They both are told their origin story through that, and this would be seen... Two characters who we still are very, very involved in the movies.
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, they're literally coming out with Love and Thunder soon. Yep.
So what'd you think? What'd you think of Thor when you saw it?
I liked it immediately because like I mentioned before, it was still a Marvel movie, but it completely took a left turn. And besides just being on Earth, being very science based, being very kind of logical, it was like, nah, these bitches are magic and they're fucking fighting magical creatures and they're all fucking magic. And I'm like, yay, magic! And as somebody who also liked, because I knew of Norse mythology because I used to play the game Age of Mythology ever since I was 10 years old or whatever, and I loved playing as the Norse.
Norse was my pick too. That's where I got my interest in Norse mythology too. Was that game?
Right. It's so good. And so when they were making something, I was like, I learned very quickly that, it's
different.
It's different.
But but
Age of Mythology is more accurate to actual Norse mythology.
Knowing the actual Norse mythology. They're very similar. The names are the same. The characters act the same. Yeah. It's just some details have changed.
Yeah, they're their origins are a little different. What they'll do are a little different. Like in the original, for example, in OG Norse mythology, Loki fucks horses. This version of Loki doesn't fuck horses. But anyway,
we don't know that for sure. But
that's true.
To be fair, he turned into a horse to fuck a horse. So just give him a little bit of credit.
But no. Anyway, back to reactions though. I genuinely thought that it was fun because it took again, it was a little bit of humor with something so ridiculous, like the wonderful, everybody knows this scene when they're in the diner and he wants another cup of coffee and he smashes it on the ground and says another.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great comedy scene, but at the same time, when you cut to Asgard and all these people are acting the same, it's very, again, like we suggested or said earlier, it's very Shakespearean.
Yep.
It almost feels like it's like an old play. You know, you're like watching an old play.
There's even the scene when the Shield guys see Sif and the Warriors 3 enter the town, and they're like, well, we just saw Shakespeare in the park.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, you know, it's very aware of it.
Yeah, and which I thought was great.
Yeah.
And again, it did the same thing that Iron Man 2 did, where it gave you a lot of, and guess what can happen because of this?
Yeah.
And a lot of open-endedness, a lot of like, what's going to happen here? And, ooh, Hawkeye's here. Ooh, what are we going to see him do more? Ooh,
Yep.
you know, like, there's a lot of new stuff that was being introduced that wasn't getting its payoff in that one movie. So you knew that there was going to be more to come.
Yep. It was a great film. It's very nowadays. It's so low to, not, no pun intended. It's so low key compared to the other Marvel films. Like, it's so self-contained and minor. Like, especially how we know Loki now as such a different character. It's just kind of like, it's almost like
after the show.
Yeah, it's almost like sad seeing him act that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, stop.
Yeah. That was actually now that you mention it, that was, I remember, my one complaint from that movie was that, like, I didn't understand why Loki was being such a little baby about everything, because I was like, dude, you got raised on Asgard with everything you could have ever wanted, with a brother who genuinely loved you, with a father and mother who genuinely loved you, like, and then you're like, man, I want to be king. All because you found out you were adopted? Sure. Maybe they should have told you when you were a kid. Maybe that would have been a better idea. But instead, you decided to throw a goddamn hissy fit and try to take over everything. So I remember when people would, like, fawning over Tom Hiddleston at the time, which I get. He's a hot guy and he played a really interesting character. I remember just thinking, like, why? He's a baby. He's being like a teenage brat.
He acts like a little brat the whole movie, which is kind of, I mean, it's the excusable part is that he's the god of trickery, lies, and mischief. So it's like,
which I also knew.
It's like of course that's how he acts. He's a little liar, little worm. You know, that's his character.
Yeah.
That's his fucking DNA. But you know, he grows in fantastic ways.
Oh yeah, big time.
Some of the best character development in all of Marvel.
Big time. Oh yeah, saddest ending.
Yeah, too. But then anyway. So, the next movie we have is the second to last movie, which is the fifth film, which is Captain America, the First Avenger, in 2011, the year after Thor. Directed by Joe Johnston, starring Chris Evans, Haley Atwell, Hugo Weaving, and Sebastian Stan.
Also, just want to point out, I have a huge crush on Haley Atwell.
Oh.
My God. But anyway, keep going.
What a queen. So, Captain America was the fifth MCU film and the final origin story of the main Avengers cast, introducing one of Marvel's most famous A-listers, Captain America, into the world of the MCU. Captain America was heavily known around the world already at this point, and was before Iron Man released, probably the second biggest Marvel solo hero next to Spider-Man.
Right, yeah.
And was well known as a leader of the Avengers as well. I've always been a big fan of Cap since I was a little kid. I had Captain America comics. Oh, yeah. I loved I played an old game on Sega Genesis that was an Avengers game where you got to play as Captain America, and he was the only one to ever play as. I was a huge Cap fan. But let's go into his comic summary before we talk about the film, which is going to go the furthest back we've gone yet, to 1940, when a writer named Joe Simon had the idea for a character who would fight Nazis in the Second World War, and came up with the idea of Super American. In his autobiography, he stated that he knew that name would never work because of how many supers already existed at the time, and he came up with instead the name Captain America. That's much better. Yes, he was given the go ahead to write a solo comic book series as soon as possible, focusing on one character, and use his regular creative partner and artist, Jack Kirby, to help with the task alongside new hires Al Lieberman, Howard Ferguson, as inker and letterer in that order. And on December 20th of 1940, Captain America Comics #1 released, a year before the attack on Pearl Harbor, almost the day.
Oof, that's pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah, the comic was made consciously as a political creation. Simon and Kirby were very much against the actions of Nazi Germany, and the people in the streets were feeling the fear of war. The story told the tale of a small man from New York named Steve Rogers who would get picked on, but then eventually would get picked to be the world's first super soldier, becoming stronger, faster, and smarter than any other man, and would go to Europe to fight in the Second World War under his superhero alias Captain America. The cover of the first issue shows Captain America punching Hitler in the face, as well as his sidekick James Buchanan Barnes, aka Bucky, right next to him. Cap was not the first politically themed superhero, however, but despite that, he did quickly become the most popular. This was also one of the only times that character was introduced with their own series and not part of an anthology book, which a practice is still used today. Most characters don't just get launched with their own book. They come from other characters' books or anthology stories. Like every other character we've mentioned so far has come from an anthology series.
That's true.
There was a complaint from MLJ Comics, known now as Archie Comics, that his pointed triangular shield was too similar to their character, the Shield, which would cause Simon and Kirby to make his iconic round shield for issue 2 that we know today.
Right.
Issue 3 would feature a filler text story that was all text. So it's like a couple pages of just text. It's like an actual little short story titled Captain America Foils Your Traitor's Revenge, written by Stanley Lieber, which would introduce Cap using his shield as a throwing weapon, which we know today. The popularity of the story would see Stanley Lieber brought into Captain America full-time, where he would change his name to Stan Lee. Cap became Timely Comics' biggest hero and would circulate over 1 million copies a month, which sold out even news magazines at the time. Such as The Times, too. Like, it outsold Time magazine.
Oh, wow.
So, Captain America was popping. Cap would go on to be given to soldiers during the war as well, who would read the stories and see Cap going around the world with Psychic Bucky, facing Nazis and even the Japanese in the Pacific, and it was used as a morale booster. After the war, superheroes started to fade out, and Cap trying to stay relevant, made Timely's first team, the All Winners Squad. What a great name.
That's all these names sound so old school.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sound like they were made by the Silent Generation.
Yeah, and the All Winners Squad was a team featuring Captain America, Bucky, Namor the Submariner, and the Human Torch. And and Captain America would quickly become an anti-communist figure under the Atlas Comics brand before it was renamed to Marvel Comics. And he would be billed as Captain America Commie Smasher!
Oh my god.
But would lose popularity and end up being canceled in Captain America number 78 in 1954. So in 1963, the new Human Torch, Johnny Storm with the Fantastic Four, not the robot from the All Winners Squad, would battle Captain America in his first reappearance after coming out of retirement, but would end up being a fake Captain America. This was made as a test to see if Captain America would still be liked by fans, and the test went well. So in Avengers number 4 in 1964, Cap would join the Avengers after being discovered frozen in ice in the North Atlantic Ocean, and he has spent several decades frozen. So, just again, for the record, Cap, not a founding Avenger. Cap would be featured alongside Iron Man in Tales of Suspense, number 64, and in 1964 he would gain his own split book in that same comic, Tales of Suspense, starring in issue number 63 in March of 1965. This was a retelling of Cap's origin story, and then was a showing of a World War II action, and co-starred his sidekick Bucky. In issue number 100, in 1968, the book would stop being a split and have his title changed to Captain America, and had a story showing that 1950s version of Captain America, the Commie Smasher, ! And his sidekick Bucky were nothing but imposters.
Oh.
Cap's solo series would carry on multiple volumes all the way until today, and would prominent in many Marvel comics and events, and even taking over Iron Man's role as leader of the Avengers in the 60s. So, comic background Captain America done. We love him. We all know him. Let's go.
American propaganda, fantastic.
Fantastic, we love it. Get the stars and stripes out there. To the movies. Yeah. Directed by Joe Johnston, who comes from bigger movies such as The Rocketeer, Jumanji, and October Sky, would make a movie, Captain America, starring Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter, Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull, and Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes. This movie would feature a World War II action feature showing some of the first big stepping stones to feature MCU films, with heavy feature on the artifact seen at the end of Thor, the Tesseract, aka the Cosmic Cube. Alright, I think this is the longest movie summary we have. The movie starts in modern-day Arctic Circle, where workers uncover a large aircraft and find a frozen circular object, which all fans immediately recognize as Captain America's shield. It then cuts to March 1942, when you see Johann Schmidt, a German officer, during an assault in Norway, and he obtains the cube that we saw at the end of Thor from someone who is protecting it in an old Norse mythology kind of relic-looking thing.
Right.
Next, it takes us to New York in 1943, where we see young, scrawny, short man named Steve Rogers says his famous "I can do this all day" line. He's getting beat up in an alleyway. Gets told once again he is rejected for military duty after multiple attempts to make the cut. While attending the Stark Expo with his best friend Bucky Barnes, Rogers fails to enlist again, but is found by scientist Abraham Erskine, who overheard he had kept trying to enlist. And Rogers is then brought into Project Rebirth, a quote-unquote super soldier experiment being conducted by the Strategic Science Reserve, or the SSR, under the supervision of Erskine, a U.S. Army colonel named Chester Phillips, and a British agent named Peggy Carter, as well as working with scientist Howard Stark. During training, Rogers jumps on a dud grenade and all the other candidates run away from, which makes him chosen to be the subject of the test. The night before, Erskine tells Rogers that German officer Johann Schmidt also underwent an imperfect version of the procedure and suffered negative side effects due to his inner ambition for power and obsession with becoming the superior man. So here's a little comic lore for you. If you remember the scene when he jumps over the grenade, Tommy Lee Jones' character is like pointing at a bigger, buffer blonde guy.
Yeah.
So in the comics, that character is the Commie Smasher.
Really?
Yeah, the fake Captain America. Imposter! Exclamation point. So, anyway, back to the movie. Cutting to Europe, you see Schmidt alongside another major Captain America villain, Arnim Zola, succeeding in harnessing the Tesseract's power to fuel Zola's inventions. In New York, Rogers takes on the experiments and is injected with the super soldier serum and dosed with Vita rays, making him emerge taller and with an enhanced physique. Suddenly, an attendee,
super sexy.
Yeah, very sexy. He went from zero to hero.
Oh god, yeah.
Suddenly, an attendee to the experiment is revealed to be an assassin and kills the scientist Erskine before escaping and being chased by Rogers, who eventually catches him, but he kills himself with a cyanide pill. And with the knowledge of the serum loss, the SSR is sent to Europe to fight, and Cap is relegated to selling war bonds in his comics classic Star Spangled outfit with his triangle shield and Star Spangled suit, dubbed himself Captain America, and is seen in films and comic books as well as stage plays around the world to the Allies. Schmidt is seen unveiling Tesseract-powered weapons to multiple Nazi officers who find out Germany is on Schmidt's targets to take out, who he subsequently kills, and you find out Schmidt is actually not a Nazi and is leading a new independent organization bent on world domination called Hydra. In 1943, Cap is in Europe performing for servicemen and finds out Bucky was taken in battle against Hydra, and with the help of Agent Carter and Howard Stark, he is able to infiltrate a Hydra facility and rescue Barnes, which he does successfully, as well as rescue the other soldiers who were captured, which turns out to be the Howling Commandos. This is the first face-off between Captain America and Schmidt when he removes his face and reveals himself to be the Red Skull. Due to the success of that, Cap is given full respect as a soldier and given high rank in fights against Hydra. Is joined by Dum Dum Dugan, Gabe Jones, Jim Morita, Montgomery Fallsworth, and Jacques Dernier as the Howling Commandos, and goes out to take out most of Hydra's operations with his new shield made of vibranium, a rare metal found only in the secluded nation of Wakanda in Africa. 1945, during an assault on a train to capture Zola, Jones locates and captures him, but during the fight the train explodes and Bucky falls out to his death, deeply affecting Cap. Using knowledge from Zola, they attack the main Hydra base, and Rogers gets aboard a ship called the Valkyrie, Hydra's massive aircraft, as it takes off, and he manages to battle Red Skull in the cockpit and defeat him. As he tries to use the Tesseract's power himself, unknowing what he's doing, he gets sucked into a wormhole, and we don't see Red Skull for a very long time.
Yep.
The cube falls through the plane and Rogers can't get out, so he crashes the plane, making his goodbye speech to Peggy Carter, his romance, and is then frozen in the ice. The movie ends with him waking up in 2011, meeting Nick Fury, who tells him he needs him for a mission with worldwide ramifications.
Bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Sorry.
Yeah, that, exactly. So, first impressions. This was my favorite Marvel movie of all time to date at this point.
Is it really?
Yeah, not now.
It's like most
Sorry.
people's least favorite.
Sorry, not now. I'm saying like back then. This was like
right.
Phase 1 at that point. This is my favorite for two reasons. World War II movies are great. Cap is also a favorite of the Avengers, hands down. So that was an easy win for me. But that aside, it's a very solid film. Everything about it just kind of works to make it a very, very good story showing the origin of Captain America as well as Bucky. The villain is great. Red Skull is fantastic. I love Hugo Weaving as Red Skull.
Right, yeah.
The one thing I think this movie really missed was seeing Cap punch Hitler in the face. Which we did see him punch fake Hitler in the face multiple times in the little stage plays, but he never got to. I wish he actually punched Hitler. That would have been fantastic. What did you think of this movie when it came out?
I also liked it because I also like World War II movies. I also like superhero movies, and I also like Captain America because, well, I actually, before this movie, I didn't like Captain America because I had the same problem with him that I do with Superman, that he's just like, oh, he's a quintessential Boy Scout superhero type, and he is, but for some reason there was something about the way Chris Evans portrayed him that I really fucking loved. There was also a few scenes in the movie, like one of the great scenes is after Bucky is quote unquote killed. I put air quotes. Yeah. He then like goes into a bar in some rundown area in Germany, I think, and he just starts drinking, but he realizes he can't get drunk because he's so perfect in his super body, and he gets like depressed about how he can't even get drunk. Like, yep. And there was something about that scene in particular for me that grounded the character so much that like, nah, he's still a guy. He's still just a dude. Like, also another scene that started winning me over was when he went to go perform for the troops overseas, how the troops had no interest in him whatsoever, and they thought he looked fucking stupid, and how they were like they were kind of like, he's just a jackass wearing spandex, where like, you know, he could sell war bonds all day in America because it was fun, it was a spectacle, but then when he actually confronted troops that had seen warfare, who had seen bloodshed, they were not impressed by him at all, and he had to then go and prove himself in order to become accepted by them, and all that was great storytelling, and I liked it as well. This is actually known as one of the people's least favorite of the Marvel movies. I think it's because I think honestly it's because of the World War II stuff, which again, you and I both liked. Yeah. But I think they thought too much. Like, again, most of the movie is a World War II flick, except with a superhero in it, and it's not even a superhero that flies and shoots lasers out of his hands or has a magical hammer or turns giant and green. It's basically just a really enhanced dude. Like, it's just a really, like, an acrobatic guy with slightly, I mean, not slightly, he's a lot stronger, but like, it doesn't seem that amazing, yet he could still like conquer all these situations. Yeah, I guess, for lack of a better word. But like, I like the movies too. The earlier movies I definitely liked more. My general feeling on Marvel movies in general are I'm personally a little drained out by them, but I still enjoy them. Like I was saying before, I tried watching The Eternals and I stopped it halfway through because I was like, God, bored. But like, but thankfully there are still enough movies like No Way Home. I watched that finally recently. I fucking loved it. But I liked this version of Captain America. It felt more real to me, and it also, again, because I'm this type of person, it helped set up a lot. Like, it was one of those things that showed you, again, when Red Hood comes back later,
Red Skull,
you know, Red Hood, Jesus,
different universe.
Different universe. Red Skull, when he comes back later, it was kind of cool because it makes a lot of sense.
That's the thing about MCU. Like you said, you're kind of burned out on it. I never do. I never get tired of them. But it's like, they're like the soap operas of movies. It's this world that we keep coming back to. We keep seeing more happen in this world, and more things happen with these characters. And we're actually at the point in the MCU now, which is something I always hoped would happen, where we're now seeing these crazy divergent stories. Yeah. These heroes, they're just making movies and shows off of comic books in the past that are just like, let's just make stories.
That's probably one reason why I'm falling off of it, because I don't know those comics, so I'm just kind of like I feel less connected with them. That's probably what it is. Whereas the earlier movies, basically Phase 1 through 3, leading to Endgame, they all felt more like anybody could kind of dive in and you wouldn't have to worry about it. I mean, whereas a lot of these more movies, the newer ones, they feel like they're for Marvel fans, which is good, and that's a good thing. I'm not trying to, but as somebody who wasn't so much a comic book reader, although I did read some Spider-Mans back in the day, I couldn't tell you which ones. I did read some X-Men back in the day. Like I did read, I think, one or two caps as well. But it just wasn't something that I was crazy obsessed with.
Yeah, they all do a good, not to dissuade people, because they all do a good job of explaining everything. None of the Marvel movies are like, you won't get it unless you're like watching a sequel. You might not get it, but you know what I mean. But like, definitely, it's all just one story. You kind of have to follow, for everything to make sense. And nowadays, there's a lot to catch up on if you haven't seen it. So get started. But yeah, so that was Captain America: The First Avenger. We're gonna move on to the final movie of today's episode, the 6th film in the MCU, The Avengers, in 2012, directed by Joss Whedon. So
fucking good. So good.
Yeah.
I watched it recently. It's so good.
After, since 2008, after 4 years, it finally happened when the main heroes we met in those movies met up together and would have a huge team up. The final movie ending Phase 1, the 6th movie in the MCU. And I just have a very short comic back, because you talked about them already. So I have a pretty short comic little background thing.
Right.
The Avengers started in 1964 with Loki threatening the world, and heroes Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Ant-Man, and Wasp had to team up and fight him together to stop him. It wouldn't be until issue 4 that Captain America joins them, as you mentioned just previously. The biggest difference, of course, being Ant-Man and Wasp.
Right.
Hank Pym
replaced by basically Black Widow and
Hawkeye. Yep.
Hawkeye.
Hank Pym would have been Ant-Man, and Janet Van Dyne was Wasp in the comics. I really, really wish they were in this, but whatever.
Sure.
Going right into the movie, this movie opens up with Loki in space, coming into contact with a being known as the Other, a servant of an unknown warlord, who makes a deal with Loki. In exchange for recovering the Tesseract, a powerful energy source being studied by S.H.I.E.L.D. on Earth, Loki will gain command of the Chitauri, a cybernetic warmongering race that he could use to conquer humanity. Loki accepts, wanting revenge on Thor, and then you cut to Nick Fury, Maria Hill, Phil Coulson, Eric Selvig, and Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, working in the Mojave Desert on the Tesseract. Soon it begins to emit energy and opens a portal in which you see Loki emerge from, and he steals the cube. He is using a weapon, which is a scepter given to him by the Other, and he uses it to enslave the minds of Selvig, Hawkeye, and a couple other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who aid him in his getaway. During this efforts, Fury and Hill manage to escape, and Fury activates the Avengers Initiative. Fury sends Black Widow to get Bruce Banner, who had been hiding in Kolkata. Coulson recruits Tony Stark, and Fury meets with Steve Rogers. They all meet up on a helicarrier where Banner tracks gamma radiation emitted by the Tesseract, and S.H.I.E.L.D. tries to go out there to find Loki. Soon, however, they don't need to look, as Loki makes himself very publicly known in Germany when he attacks and terrorizes a crowd at a gala, where Hawkeye gets an iridium sample to stabilize the Tesseract so Loki can control it. Widow and Cap attempt to apprehend Loki when Iron Man arrives, and then Loki surrenders. Being captured, they return to the helicarrier when a storm breaks out, and Thor shows up out of nowhere, grabbing Loki and jumping out of the plane.
I love that scene very
yes,
much.
My favorite Captain America quote, "There's only one God, ma'am, and he doesn't dress like that." Loki is then being talked to by Thor, in which Captain America and Iron Man land, have a little fight with him for a moment, where you see Thor's hammer reflect Mjolnir, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
However, at the end, Thor agrees to work with the Avengers, and they take Loki back to the helicarrier. Loki is put in a cage designed for Hulk, and Fury interrogates him, but soon they learn his plan is to invade with Chitauri. The Avengers begin arguing amongst each other and question S.H.I.E.L.D.'s intentions. Cap finds out that a restricted area contained Hydra weapons from World War II that he recognizes, and they eventually plan to make more weapons from the cube. They confront Fury, who confirms this, and soon Hawkeye arrives, attacking the helicarrier to free Loki, resulting in an explosion which causes Banner and Widow to fall down into the boiler room area, and trapped by wreckage, Banner transforms into the Hulk. Things get bad when the Hulk rampages, and the attack eventually ends when Loki escapes, but not after killing S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Coulson, who had become a good friend to Cap and Iron Man, and a character that the audience liked at this point. Hawkeye is also broken from his mind control and joins the team during this time. Fury then uses the death of Coulson to make them work as a team, which they agree to finally do, forming the Avengers, and they arrive in New York to fight Loki, who will begin summoning the Chitauri. Great scenes and battles happen, but with no end in sight, they launch a nuclear warhead at the city to stop them. Iron Man catches the nuke and carries it through a portal in the sky, making it explode in space, wiping out the majority of the Chitauri force, closing the portal just after he makes it through. Loki is captured and taken to Asgard, and at the end of the credits, we reveal the other, meeting with this warlord who is revealed to be none other than big bad Marvel villain Thanos.
Which got so many people hard as rocks.
Yes, I was one of them. None of my friends knew why I screamed in the theater when Thanos was revealed at the end. And I was going, no fucking way are they doing Infinity War.
Yeah, well, they are.
Yeah. So, reaction looking back, when this movie came out, I was so impressed and so amazed that this actually happened, and it was good. Because there was like a part of me, like all the Marvel movies I liked up to this point, but a part of me was expecting disappointment. Because like there's no way.
That's what always happens.
Yeah.
That's what always happens with big franchises too, is like they do a lot of good job with the build up, and then when they finally give you the big climax, it's like, oh.
Exactly.
Right. It's like a lot of good foreplay, but turns out it's pushing
my biggest thing was how are they going to get all this star power to interact with each other well? And they did it. They did it excellently.
They did it so
all the actors did so great in the movie.
I think they were all excited.
Oh, 100%. They all loved being in that movie. And I have, looking back at this movie, I have no complaints. Loki is the perfect villain. He's the original comic villain. Introducing Thanos at the end sets up the rest of the MCU, until basically now.
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
So, like, it was a great movie.
Yeah, I have no complaints.
Yeah,
no
no complaints at all. It's a fantastic film. The Avengers was so good.
I do think out of Phase 1, it's probably like the best one, just because it culminates all what's good about the other movies. Because like again, I pointed out before in each one, like the criticisms that the world and even sometimes I had for some of those previous movies. Whereas with this one, I was just kind of like, nope, it is the perfect superhero movie.
Yes.
It is funny. It is dramatic. The action sequences are a blast, pun intended. Like. The morality and questions are always great. The characters, the casting, the direction, the cinematography, the music, dun 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 dun.
Yep.
It's all good. It's all good movie.
I remember seeing that movie. I remember seeing that movie in theater. Like I remember going to theater and seeing it and being so just amazed that this could exist. It's like my childhood coming to life, and it still is.
Right.
They still are. But. Yeah, that's the last movie of Phase 1 and the end of the movies we're covering today in Part 1 of the Marvelous movies. The next part will be Phase 2, which, if you ask me, is the worst of the phases.
Sure, I can, yeah.
But
I mean, I still liked a lot of the movies in there, but I agree.
Here's the thing, I like all the movies. There's some I don't like as much. You know what I mean?
I'm there too.
Thor: Dark Worlds. I'm looking at you.
It's not great. Yeah, loved Winter Soldier though.
Yeah, I was gonna say Phase 2 has one of my favorite movies of all Marvel, which is Winter Soldier. So
good. Yeah. So,
but yes,
it does have its good ones, and I also liked Iron Man 3 because I loved. Well, we'll talk about it more, but Tony's dealing with trauma.
I some people disagree with me, but I fucking loved Ultron.
Oh, I liked Ultron too.
I thought it was great. I thought it was fantastic. Like I don't know, people hate on it for reasons I don't understand, but I love that movie.
Yeah, I thought it was good. Yeah.
So
I had no problem. I don't really have many problems with it. I think the big problem with that one is when they introduced Thanos at the end of Avengers 1, and then the main villain in Ultron was Ultron.
Yeah.
It felt like, but we know what we want. You know what we want. We don't want Ultron. We want the big guy. Yeah. And that was why. And I think because we didn't get almost any of that. Although, again, we'll talk about it a lot more next time. Ultron set up a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure he's coming. I'm sure he's coming back soon.
Probably, yeah.
You can't really just get rid of Ultron. So
it's true. He's kind of,
once he connects to the internet, he's probably never going to be gone again. Okay, so yeah, that's the end of the episode, guys. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and listening to this. I might just do part 2 next week, and then we'll take a little break from that for a little while.
I'd be super down. Yeah, I love talking about the movies too, because I have, again, I like, you are the diehard, like, not can do no wrong, because you'll admit criticisms, but I definitely like listened to the criticisms more and accepted them and sort of like rolled with it. So I feel like we have similar perspectives because we've all enjoyed these movies a lot. But I'm willing to kind of come in and be like, this was kind of stupid.
Yeah, like, Ant-Man and Wasp isn't a great movie. But yeah, so next time we'll be covering part 2. I hope we'll see all you guys back. I hope you enjoyed it. Everyone, have a great night, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, guys.